His face was so close I could feel the air shift between us. The hallway was dim, the power had flickered again, like it always did when the lodge's ancient generator coughed in the middle of the Vermont wind. Just beyond the wooden door behind me, I could still hear the hum of my husband's voice somewhere downstairs, laughing with the front desk clerk about God knows what. And yet here I was, barefoot, breath held, frozen in the doorway of our shared hotel room, staring into the eyes of the one man I should have never allowed so close. Neither of us moved. We didn't have to. The pull was loud, like the silence between two songs. All it would have taken was an inch. Half a breath. A moment. And then, voices. Footsteps. Loud. Clumsy. Parents calling out from the lobby, "Y'all settled and up there?" He stepped back. I turned away. Everything inside me turned with him. Before I begin the story and tell you how everything really happened, answer this question: would you be able to forgive a loved one's betrayal? We'd planned a weekend away for Labor Day. The kind of thing families do when they're trying to pretend they still enjoy each other. A charming mountain lodge tucked in the folds of rural Vermont, the kind of place with hand-sewn quilts, mismatched mugs, and no cell service. My husband insisted it would be wholesome, a word that always made me feel about as desirable as a sack of laundry. We arrived late, after dark, after a long drive filled with wrong turns and cold fries. Everyone was tense. The kind of tired that makes you resent the person next to you for breathing too loud. And then came the mix-up. The room that was supposed to be ours, mine and my husband's, had been double-booked. A wedding party from Boston had apparently charmed the manager into giving it away. The best the clerk could offer was 2 rooms, one with a queen bed for the parents, and one with a single king-size bed. We all stood there in the cozy lobby, as the wind howled outside like it was trying to pull the walls down. The fire crackled in the hearth. Everyone was watching me. "Well," my husband said with a laugh, "you two don't mind sharing, right?" I looked at him. Then at the other one standing beside me. My husband's son from a previous marriage, not mine by blood, but someone who had been in my house, my life, for over a decade. Older now. Different. A man. And yet, not supposed to be this kind of man to me. He shrugged, "Easy. I don't snore." That was how it began. The room smelled like cedar and cold air. 2 suitcases by the door. 1 bed. 1 blanket. He tossed his jacket on the armchair and said, "Guess I'll build a wall of pillows like summer camp." I smiled. Too wide, too quick. We're adults. It's one night. It wasn't. Dinner was downstairs, and I was never more aware of where he sat than that night. He joked with the waitress. He passed me the salt before I asked. He asked about my job, my commute, my life. My husband barely looked up from his phone. Later, lying in the dark, I could hear the rhythm of his breathing. Not loud. Not quiet. Just present. I faced the wall, arms tied around myself, trying to ignore how much space one bed suddenly didn't feel like. "You still awake?" he asked. I didn't answer. Couldn't. The next morning was cold and golden. The kind of light that makes everything look like a postcard. We packed into the car and drove out to some old lookout trail his father remembered from years ago. The whole ride there, my heart pulsed in my throat like a trapped animal. I couldn't look at him. Couldn't look away either. The hike wasn't long, but it was steep. The trail was covered in leaves that slipped underfoot like marbles. We moved in clusters. My husband kept stopping to check the map on a paper brochure. He never trusted phones even when they worked. Somehow, we ended up separated. The group ahead. Us behind. He reached out as I nearly lost my balance on a root. held my elbow, steadied me. Didn't let go right away. "You all right?" he asked. I nodded. But I wasn't. The path led us to a wide, open ledge. Mountains rolled out in every direction. Trees below looked like someone had spilled paint across the land, burnt orange, deep red, ochre. We stood there, side by side, not speaking. "I always hated these family trips," he said suddenly. "Felt like everyone was pretending." "Still do," I said before I could stop myself. He looked at me. "Do you?" "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly." The silence after that wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged. When we returned to the lodge that evening, something had shifted. My husband went to bed early, complaining about his back. I stayed downstairs longer, pretending to look through the lodge's bookshelf. He came down, too. Sat near the fire. We didn't talk. Just watched the flames flicker like they were trying to spell something out. Back upstairs, the room was dim. Warmer now. "Clothes." He brushed his teeth. I washed my face. We didn't speak. When I climbed into bed, he was already there, facing away. A pillow wall between us. Thin. Almost laughable. I lay there for what felt like hours. Listening. Thinking. Not thinking. My heart louder than the wind outside. Then I heard movement. A shift. He turned. The wall of pillows gave way. And just as I turned to face him, the sound of boots on the stairs. My husband's voice, closer than it should have been. "Hey. Y'all awake?" The front desk gave us an extra blanket. A knock. Everything froze. He turned away. I pulled the blanket to my chin. When the door opened, all I could do was smile. And pray my voice didn't crack. The next morning, I woke up alone. His suitcase was by the door, zipped. The bed beside me looked like no one had ever been there. Downstairs, he stood outside on the porch, arms folded, eyes on the trees. "I had a dream," he said. "We weren't family." And then he smiled. And everything I thought I could control unraveled inside me like the wind peeling leaves from the trees. The look he gave me that morning didn't leave me, not even for a second. I stood in the bathroom brushing my hair, watching the soft sunlight creep across the tile, and all I could hear were his words. "I had a dream we weren't family." It was the way he said it. Quiet. Like he didn't mean to say it out loud, but did. By the time I stepped out of the room, he was already downstairs. His suitcase still zipped by the door, untouched since last night, yet it looked like it didn't belong to either of us anymore. The day's plan was already set. A hike, a picnic, something scenic. My husband was buzzing with energy as if this little trip had reset his batteries. He kissed my cheek on the porch, chuckled about the weather, and handed me a scarf. His son barely made eye contact. We loaded into the car, the four of us. The heat was up too high. I opened my window slightly just to breathe. The drive twisted through orange-covered hills, and the roads shimmered with leaves like the forest had spilled over. Nobody spoke for the first 10 minutes. We arrived at the trailhead around noon. It was more crowded than I expected, but that didn't stop us. We set out with paper bags full of sandwiches and thermoses of cider. The sun felt too bright and the wind too loud. The path forked halfway up, and my husband cheerfully suggested we split up, something about racing to the overlook from different angles. He grabbed my hand and tugged me toward one direction, but I instinctively hesitated. I didn't want to be separated from the one person I couldn't stop thinking about. Then, like fate had a dark sense of humor, he suggested it instead. "Why don't we switch? I'll go with her, you two go that way," he said, clapping a hand on his son's back. Nobody objected. No one questioned the pairing. The forest swallowed us in two pairs, and the path narrowed quickly behind us. We didn't speak much at first. The trail crunched under our feet. The trees whispered with every gust. He walked ahead of me slightly, hands in pockets, posture stiff. Eventually, I broke the silence. "Why did you say that?" "About the dream." His shoulders tensed. He didn't stop walking. "Because it felt real." I wasn't ready for that answer. We climbed higher, and the trail curved sharply. One bad step and you'd slide into a ditch. I stumbled slightly, catching myself against a tree. He turned fast and reached out, but stopped inches from me. No contact. Just concern. "You okay?" I nodded, breath shaky. "Just lost my footing." He didn't move. Just looked at me, as if trying to memorize the exact version of me that existed in that second. I looked back. The forest around us blurred. The breeze carried our silence like it was sacred. And then, in the middle of all that unsaid, we kissed. It happened without thought, without ceremony. A moment suspended, breath shared, a single decision neither of us planned to make, and yet, it was made. We both stepped back instantly. The trees didn't react. The air didn't shift. But something inside me cracked, quietly, like an icicle snapping from a roof, no sound, just sudden absence. I turned and kept walking. By the time we rejoined the others at the overlook, my heart hadn't slowed. The view was stunning, a golden sea of treetops, with the town barely visible below. I stood next to my husband. His son stood on the other side. I said nothing. The picnic was forgettable. Sandwiches I didn't taste. Laughter I didn't join. My husband pulled me close for a photo and whispered that we should come back in spring, just the two of us. I nodded. I didn't hear him. That night at the lodge, the mood shifted. A quietness had seeped in like fog. At dinner, my husband drank a bit too much wine and started reminiscing about old road trips, the ones we used to take before bills and routines turned us into strangers. I smiled at the right moments, held his hand when he reached for mine. Pretended like my stomach wasn't tangled in knots. Back in the room, the bed felt smaller. The wall of pillows returned. He didn't speak. Neither did I. But I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the dark ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. The walk. The kiss. The silence. I wondered if he regretted it. If he wished it never happened. If I did. At some point, I slipped out of bed and walked down to the common area. The fire had gone out. The lodge was quiet. I found him outside, standing barefoot on the porch in just a hoodie and jeans. His arms crossed. His eyes fixed on the woods. I stepped beside him, not touching, just close enough to feel the same air. Neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, but not uncomfortable. Just inevitable. Eventually, I said, "This can't happen again." He nodded, slow. "I know." And that was it. Until the next morning. My husband decided we'd all go into town for the Apple Festival. An impulsive idea, cheery and bright. "Let's just do something fun," he said. "Make a memory." I said yes because I couldn't think of a reason not to. The festival was exactly what you'd expect: caramel apples, hayrides, cider in styrofoam cups, families taking photos next to decorative pumpkins. We stuck together at first. My husband made jokes, bought a cinnamon candle for his sister, pointed out crafts he thought were overpriced. Then he wandered off to look at antiques with his brother. I stayed behind to browse a rack of scarves. And that's when I felt him again. Beside me. Too close. He didn't speak. Just picked up a pair of gloves, green wool, and said quietly, "These would suit you." I took them. My fingers grazed his. I didn't put them back. We didn't linger. We didn't speak again. Later, we were all on the hayride. Sitting across from each other. My husband beside me. I stared at the blur of trees and barns and hay bales. I didn't notice his gaze until it locked with mine again. It was only a second. But it was enough. That evening, back at the lodge, I unpacked my coat and found the gloves. He must have bought them. I never saw him pay. I tucked them under my pillow. And then came the twist I never saw coming. We were packing up to leave the next morning when my husband walked over holding a folded sheet of paper. I recognized the lodge's logo at the top. A printout. "Hey," he said casually. "Is this yours?" I took it. It was a receipt. For a purchase from the lodge's gift shop. Room 213. His room. 2 nights ago. Under his name. 2 items, a pair of gloves. And a bottle of lavender pillow spray. I looked at my husband. He raised an eyebrow. "You shopping for someone?" he asked, trying to tease. I smiled. Too wide, too quick. And said the only thing I could. Must have been a mistake. My smile didn't reach my eyes, and I knew he could see it. The second I handed the receipt back to my husband, my fingers felt like ice. I mumbled something about the gift shop clerk mixing things up. He laughed, said maybe someone else in room 213 had good taste. I nodded, eyes on the floor, pulse pounding loud enough to drown out his next sentence. We finished packing in silence. Everyone moved like pieces in a machine, zipping bags, folding jackets, checking under the bed for stray socks. Outside, the car was already running. My husband went down to warm it up, calling out that he'd check us out at the front desk. I stayed behind for a moment, claiming I needed to double-check the bathroom. Truthfully, I just needed to breathe. I stood in front of the mirror, palms flat against the counter, trying to remember the version of myself from 4 days ago. Before the room mix-up. Before the hike. Before the gloves. That version didn't exist anymore. When I came back into the room, he was alone, standing by the window. His bag at his feet. His eyes met mine for a split second, long enough to know he was just as rattled. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. The drive down the mountain was strangely quiet. My husband hummed along to a classic rock station while his son sat behind me, earbuds in, gazing out the window. At some point, the wind picked up and golden leaves whipped across the windshield like sparks. Everything felt like it was moving too fast and too slow at the same time. We stopped at a scenic overlook. The kind with coin-operated binoculars and a wooden sign describing the geography. My husband insisted we all get out and stretch our legs. He wandered toward the edge of the cliff to snap a photo. I leaned against the car, arms crossed, watching him. And then, out of nowhere, his son stepped beside me and said quietly, "I didn't mean for any of it." I kept my gaze on the trees. Neither did I. He hesitated. Should we pretend it never happened? I didn't answer. We drove the rest of the way in near total silence. When we got back to the house, the air felt heavier than it should have. Familiar, yes, but too tight. The kind of silence that usually follows an argument or a funeral. I went upstairs with my bag, started sorting laundry just for the sake of doing something. I could hear the two of them downstairs laughing at something on TV, like nothing had shifted. Like I wasn't unraveling with every second. Later that night, my husband passed out early on the couch. His son came into the kitchen while I was rinsing a glass. I could feel the electricity before he even spoke. "I can leave early in the morning," he said. I didn't turn around. "That's not necessary." "I think it is." Still, I didn't face him. My fingers curled tighter around the glass. "It didn't mean anything, right?" He was quiet for a second. "I don't think that's true." The room felt smaller than ever. I rinsed the glass again. Then I turned off the tap and walked away. The next morning, everyone was already up early. My husband was in a rush, pacing around the house muttering about a client meeting he forgot to reschedule. He asked his son to stick around a few more days, help organize the garage. "You've got nowhere to be, right?" he said with a grin. "Might as well earn your keep." I froze at the top of the stairs. I could see the hesitation on his face from above, how he started to say no, then glanced toward me. "Sure," he finally said. And just like that, he was staying. The next few days passed in a blur of avoidance. I threw myself into cleaning out drawers, catching up on work emails, anything to stay busy. He stayed mostly out in the garage, or went on long walks I pretended not to notice. But then came Sunday. The power went out that morning during a thunderstorm. A tree had come down somewhere along the power line, and the whole neighborhood was stuck in a 1980s flashback. No Wi-Fi. No TV. My husband suggested a family night in front of the fireplace with board games and candles. He opened a bottle of wine, made popcorn on the stovetop, and dug out an old Scrabble board. The three of us sat cross-legged on the living room floor while the rain thudded gently on the windows. The fire crackled. The room smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke. I was 3 glasses in before I realized I hadn't eaten all day. He sat across from me. The board between us. My husband to my left, humming an old song under his breath while counting tiles. My letters were useless. I stared at them, not seeing anything. His son placed down his tiles one by one. The word he spelled snaked across the middle of the board, secret. I felt the air leave my lungs. My husband laughed. "Ooh, dramatic. What's next, lies? Betrayal?" I forced a laugh. My cheeks burned. We played 2 more rounds. Then my husband declared himself the winner and poured another glass of wine. Said he was heading upstairs to take a bath, told us to clean up the board. As soon as he was gone, I started collecting the tiles. He didn't move. The storm outside had turned to a light drizzle, tapping softly on the windows like it was trying to apologize. "I didn't write it for you," he said finally. I didn't look up. "Didn't say you did." He leaned forward. "But you felt it anyway, didn't you?" I stood quickly, the box of tiles nearly slipping from my hands. "I'm going for a walk," I said. "It's raining." "I don't care." I grabbed my coat and slipped out the front door, letting the drizzle hit my face like pins. The air was sharp. Clean. My shoes sank into the wet lawn as I cut across the yard and headed for the wooded path behind the house. I didn't hear him follow me. But I felt him. 10 minutes into the trail, I stopped. The trees arched above like cathedral ceilings, and the fog curled low around the roots. I turned. He was standing a few feet behind, hands in his coat pockets, breathing hard. "This is a bad idea," I said. "I know. We can't keep doing this." "I know." We stared at each other. The space between us buzzing like a live wire. And then, we kissed. No one spoke after. The trees didn't rustle. The wind didn't sigh. But then I heard it. A voice. Faint. Too close. "Hello?" I froze. Another voice, louder now. My husband's. Are you two out here? We jumped apart. I looked around wildly, heart pounding. He was coming down the trail. We had no time. I turned blindly into the woods and started walking fast, trying to make it look like nothing had happened. When we finally met on the path, my husband grinned and held up 2 bottles of cider. Figured we'd make a night of it, he said. Glad I found you before you got too far. His son nodded behind me, silent. And I smiled. Too wide. Too quick. He handed me the bottle like it was the most casual thing in the world. Hard cider, chilled from the cooler in the trunk, beads of condensation rolling down the side. I reached for it with hands that were still shaking. We walked back to the house the way people do when they're trying to pretend the last 5 minutes didn't just happen. The mud clung to my boots, the air clung to my skin, and nothing, not the wind, not the rustling leaves, not even his father's jokes, could wash off the truth of what had taken place in that forest. Inside, the lights were back on. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft click of the furnace kicking in, the clatter of mismatched dishes as my husband set the table, all of it made the house feel normal again. Familiar. Safe. But nothing inside me was either of those things anymore. Dinner was thrown together quickly. Soup from a can, sandwiches toasted on the griddle. My husband talked the whole time, about a new project at work, about a car commercial he saw that reminded him of a road trip we once took, about how Vermont cider always reminded him of his childhood. I nodded, responded when necessary, stirred my spoon without tasting a thing. Across from me, he ate in silence. He didn't look up once. Neither did I. After we ate, my husband went to his office to check emails. He said he'd only be a few minutes. I knew that meant an hour. I stayed in the kitchen, putting things away. I wiped the same countertop 3 times. Behind me, I heard the footsteps. Not loud. Deliberate. When I turned, he was already standing there. I'm leaving tomorrow, he said quietly. I paused. Why? You know why. I nodded. I didn't fight it. It was the right choice. Probably the only one. He hovered there for a moment, then walked out without another word. That night, I couldn't sleep. Again. I lay beside my husband, who was breathing heavily into his pillow, already deep into sleep. The clock blinked 1:12 a.m. I counted ceiling tiles, ran grocery lists through my head, rehearsed conversations that would never happen. I got up to get water. The hallway was dark, the floor cool under my feet. I didn't expect to see him. But I did. He was sitting on the stairs, elbows on his knees, looking like he'd been there a while. He didn't speak. Just glanced up, once, then back down. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass. I didn't return to my room right away. Instead, I opened the door to the porch. The air was cold but clean, and I stepped outside, wrapping my arms around myself. The sky was clear, the stars sharp and endless above. A few moments later, he joined me. We stood side by side, not touching. Not speaking. The kind of silence that has weight to it. The kind that knows better than words. Eventually, I said, it doesn't matter that we didn't plan it. I know. It still happened. I know. Neither of us moved. The door creaked open behind us, and we both turned at the sound of my husband's voice. Hey, he said, yawning. You two can't sleep either? I smiled and said something about the cider keeping me up. He laughed, told us to go to bed, and shuffled back down the hall, oblivious. The next morning came too fast. I woke up late to the sound of movement downstairs, suitcases being zipped, coffee brewing, the low murmur of goodbyes. By the time I got down there, he was already standing by the door, bag in hand. My husband was going on and on about how they needed to plan another trip soon. Something longer next time. Maybe Maine. Maybe a cabin with better Wi-Fi. He clapped his son on the shoulder, pulled him into a brief hug, and turned to grab something from the garage. We were alone for just a second. He looked at me. I looked back. Neither of us spoke. And then he left. I closed the door behind him and leaned against it like it was the only thing holding me upright. The hours passed in a blur. I cleaned the house top to bottom. Did laundry I didn't need to do. Rearranged pantry shelves. My husband noticed my restlessness and chalked it up to post-trip blues. He told me I needed a long bath and a glass of wine. I smiled, nodded, and said maybe later. That night, I found the gloves. They were in the drawer beside my bed. I hadn't touched them since the lodge. I pulled them out and held them for a long time. I should have thrown them away. Instead, I tucked them into my coat pocket and went downstairs. My husband was asleep on the couch again. TV on, volume low. The credits of some sitcom scrolled across the screen. I covered him with a blanket and turned off the light. The next morning, he woke up with a sore back and asked if we could do something low-key for the day. Maybe a drive. Maybe the lake. He suggested we pack a lunch and go for a short hike. Just the two of us. I didn't want to go. I said yes anyway. We drove out to a trail not far from town, one we'd walked 100 times before. It looped around a lake, gentle and quiet. There was a bench halfway around where we always stopped. He loved that bench. We reached it around noon. He sat down, opened the thermos, poured coffee into paper cups. Handed me one with a grin. I tried to smile back. He said something about how nice it was to be alone again. How peaceful things felt. He asked if I was okay. I told him I was just tired. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then he said, "You've been different lately." I froze. Not in a bad way, he added quickly. Just distant. Distracted. I stared at the water. I guess I've had a lot on my mind. He nodded. I figured. But if there's anything you want to talk about. I shook my head. No. It's nothing. He let it go. Eventually, we walked the rest of the trail and drove home in silence. When we got back, he suggested he'd take a nap. I said I might go for a walk before it got dark. I stepped outside just as the sun began to dip. The sky was painted with soft oranges and muted purples. I walked without a destination, coat pulled tight around me, hands buried deep in my pockets. And then I saw him. Standing across the street. No car. No suitcase. Just him. Our eyes locked for a moment that felt infinite. Then he stepped forward and said the words that made the air vanish from my lungs. They asked me to stay with you for a while. Just until things calmed down. I didn't speak. I couldn't. And then the front door opened behind me. My husband's voice, casual, oblivious, floating out into the dusk. Who's that? I didn't turn around. My heart was too loud. I didn't turn around right away. I couldn't. His voice behind me, cheerful, unaware, carved through the air like a blade that didn't know it was sharp. My heart wasn't beating anymore, it was crashing. I could feel the weight of both of them at once, the presence in front of me that shouldn't be there, and the voice behind me that shouldn't have to ask. I took a breath that didn't feel like mine and finally turned. That's, I said, then stopped. My mouth moved before my mind caught up. He forgot his wallet. Just came to get it. It was the first thing I could think of. Behind me, my husband stepped out barefoot onto the porch, squinting at the fading light. Oh, that's right. You left in kind of a rush. The man across the street didn't say anything. He didn't smile, didn't nod. Just stood still, like he understood exactly what I was trying to protect and exactly how fragile it all was. Come on in, my husband called out, waving him toward the house. She made that lemon cake you like. There's still some left. He hesitated for only a second before starting across the street, each step slow, deliberate, quiet like the prelude to something inevitable. My mouth was dry. My legs didn't want to move, but I forced them to. The three of us stood in the kitchen moments later, the overhead light humming louder than it should have. I sliced the cake with trembling fingers while they caught up, or tried to. My husband mentioned weather, traffic, something about a football game he missed over the weekend. I didn't taste the cake. I barely remembered eating it. Afterward, my husband went to shower, telling me to show him where he'd be staying. I nodded. I walked down the hall like someone moving through a dream they couldn't wake from. We reached the guest room, the one I had just aired out the week before, not knowing it would become this. As soon as I closed the door behind us, the silence wrapped around us like a second skin. He looked at me, and for the first time in days, I couldn't read him. I told them I'd stay for a few days, he said. They offered. It didn't come from me. I know. They think it's good for me. To be close to family. The word landed between us like an accusation. I didn't ask for this, I whispered. He stepped closer. Neither did I. Outside the door, I could hear my husband humming in the shower. The water running. The normalness of everything. The lie of it. This can't keep happening, I said, quieter this time. He looked at me. No nod. No smile. No agreement. But no denial either. That night, we moved through the house like actors in a play too long in production. I poured tea. He helped clear dishes. We all sat on the couch and watched a documentary none of us followed. The credits rolled in silence. My husband drifted off first, like always, head slumped against a pillow, arm draped across his chest. I stood and stretched, announced I was heading up to bed. He echoed the same. I reached the top of the stairs first, heart pounding so hard it echoed in my throat. I didn't turn when I heard his footsteps behind me. I kept going. I didn't look back. I just opened the door to my room and walked inside. And still, I couldn't sleep. Hours passed. The house stayed quiet. But nothing inside me did. I don't know when I got up. I only know that I did. I stepped into the hallway in bare feet and didn't make a sound. The moonlight was faint through the upstairs window, casting everything in soft gray. I passed 2 closed doors and reached the third. I didn't knock. When I opened the door, he was awake. Neither of us said a word. We spent night together. By the time dawn pushed its way through the curtains, I wasn't the same person anymore. I left before he woke up. Moved through the hallway like a shadow and returned to my room. My husband was still asleep, mouth open slightly, sheets tangled around his waist. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for a long time. Later that morning, the air was unusually warm for autumn. My husband suggested we all go for a walk before lunch. A family stroll, just through the neighborhood trail loop, nothing strenuous. I said yes. We set off down the sidewalk, the 3 of us in a loose triangle. My husband in front, talking about something he read in the news. I followed behind, next to the one person I couldn't stop looking at and couldn't afford to be seen looking at. As we reached the edge of the woods, my husband suggested we split up. "Let's make it interesting," he joked. "Let's all take different trails and see who makes it back first." He darted left. I didn't realize I had gone right until I was already 10 steps in. I walked faster than usual. The trail narrowed and dipped slightly, fallen leaves crunching underfoot. The canopy above was thick, light streaming through in golden spears. I wasn't thinking. I couldn't. Then I heard him. He was behind me, quiet, just out of view. "Wait." I stopped. We were alone. Too alone. "This morning shouldn't have happened," I said, already knowing it didn't matter. "I know. But I don't regret it." He didn't respond. I turned to face him. That was the moment we heard it. A voice. Clear. Close. Calling both our names. My husband's voice. He was somewhere in the woods with us. And he wasn't alone. I heard branches breaking underfoot. More voices. Then his father's voice, sharp, cutting, angry. "There you are, what the hell is going on?" I turned. They stood at the edge of the clearing. My husband. His father. My husband's face twisted into something between shock and confusion. And I realized. They had seen us kiss. No one spoke at first. The forest seemed to recoil with us, every tree standing frozen, every sound sucked out of the air like it had been holding its breath for this very moment. My body wouldn't move. I couldn't look away from their faces, my husband's wide-eyed disbelief, his father's rigid stillness, his mouth parting but no words coming out. I opened my lips to explain, deny, anything, but nothing formed. My breath caught halfway up my throat. I could feel the weight of his presence beside me, too close, too guilty, too obvious. Then came the sound of a branch snapping beneath someone's shoe, and suddenly everything moved. "What was that?" my husband asked, his voice sharp now, not playful, not confused, angry in a way I hadn't heard before. "What just happened?" His father didn't say a word. He looked from me to him, then back again, and something changed in his face. Not just suspicion anymore, certainty. "I asked you something," my husband repeated. His voice cracked at the end, not from rage, but from something quieter. Something worse. I swallowed hard. "It's not." "Don't," he said. One word. Quiet. Deadly. His hands were clenched at his sides. Not fists, just tight enough that I could see the veins in his arms. His jaw worked once, then again. He looked at me like I was someone else. Like he didn't recognize me. "I didn't mean for this," I started again, my voice smaller than I intended. He turned around and walked back into the woods. His father lingered, eyes still locked on us, and then, without a word, followed his son's path, the leaves rustling under his shoes like a slow retreat. We were left standing in the clearing, in silence again. I didn't move. Neither did he. Back at the house, the air was heavier than it had ever been. I didn't know how we got there. I remember following the trail. I remember my fingers brushing against the trees as I passed, needing to feel something real. I remember his footsteps behind me, steady, reluctant. When we reached the porch, my husband's car was gone. I stood there for a full minute before realizing I was holding my breath. Inside, everything was exactly as we had left it. 2 coffee cups in the sink. The soft blanket still draped over the couch. A half-read newspaper. The scent of lemon still faint in the kitchen. None of it made sense anymore. I went upstairs without saying a word and closed the bedroom door behind me. I stood in the middle of the room, not sitting, not pacing, just standing, as if waiting for instructions on what to do next. I didn't cry. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what emotion to assign this to. Guilt? Fear? Grief? It was all of it. And none of it. When I came back down, he was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with both hands flat, his head bowed slightly. Like he'd been waiting for judgment. I didn't know they were behind us, he said. I nodded. Neither did I. I should leave. You can't. Not now. They saw it. I know. I made us tea because it was something to do. I set it on the table. We didn't drink it. The hours crawled. No messages. No return. No slamming doors. The silence itself was unbearable. At dusk, I stepped outside to clear my head. The air was thick with the scent of rain even though none had come. The sky was dull and heavy, clouds low and unmoving. When I turned to go back in, I saw headlights rounding the bend. My breath stopped. The car pulled into the driveway. My husband stepped out, slowly, methodically. He didn't slam the door. He didn't storm up the path. He carried a grocery bag in one hand. A neutral expression on his face. I stood frozen by the porch steps. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "We're going to act like none of that happened." I didn't understand. What? He walked past me. Into the house. Set the bag on the counter. He started putting things away. Bread. Milk. Paper towels. Then he turned to me and said, calmly, "We have dinner plans tomorrow with my parents. You'll wear the green dress. We'll smile. We'll act normal." I couldn't speak. "You're going to pretend. Because if we don't, it all falls apart. And you're not ready for that." He looked at me like he already knew the answer. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. But I didn't. I just stood there as he walked up the stairs, each step deliberate, not angry, resigned. I didn't follow him. Instead, I turned to the guest room. He was already packing. "I'm leaving tonight," he said without turning around. "You heard him." "I don't care." "I do." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something like pain under the quiet. He zipped his bag. And then he said something I'll never forget. "I was never supposed to be your mistake." Then he walked out of the room. I didn't stop him. An hour passed. Then another. Then came the sound I didn't expect. The front door opened. I looked up from the couch. He was back. His suitcase still in his hand. He said nothing. Just stood there. Then, from behind him. A voice. Unfamiliar. Female. Warm. Smiling. "Oh. I didn't realize you had guests," she said. A woman stepped into the doorway behind him. Pretty. Well put together. Holding a small bag. "I'm just dropping off the rest of his things," she said. "We're still figuring out the move." She turned to him and smiled. "I'll see you soon?" He nodded. She left. And he closed the door. I stared at him, everything inside me unraveling. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't know how." "You had someone." "I still do." He set the suitcase down slowly. And that's when it hit me. I was never the only secret in the room. The door clicked shut with the softest finality, but inside me, it rang like a slammed gate. My breath caught and stayed in my chest, unmoving, as if anything I exhaled might give away just how much I was unraveling. He didn't look at me. Not after she left. Not as he set his suitcase by the wall like he belonged here, like nothing had shifted, when in reality, everything had just split in half. Still do. That's what he'd said. Not past tense. Present. A wound still open. A connection still alive. And now here he was, standing in my house, in front of me, without apology. Without shame. As if I was supposed to already know. I backed into the kitchen. I needed the counter behind me, needed something solid. The tiles were cool against my palms. The room felt off balance, my center of gravity completely gone. My legs should have walked away, should have climbed the stairs or left the house altogether, but instead, I stood there watching him. He unzipped his coat like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just dropped a second betrayal into the middle of a mess we already couldn't clean up. And somehow, I was more angry at myself than him. I should have seen it. The distance. The practiced silences. The moments he disappeared into thought. I thought I had meant more. I thought we were two people escaping something, not two people building a lie on top of another. I should go upstairs, I said. He didn't answer. I walked past him slowly. My shoulder nearly brushed his, and for a second, I paused, expecting something. A hand, a word, anything to acknowledge what had just torn the air between us. But there was nothing. Upstairs, the hallway light was off, but I didn't turn it on. I stepped into the bedroom. My husband was already asleep, his back to my side of the bed, the soft rise and fall of his breath keeping time in the dark. I sat down on the edge of the mattress, unsure whether I wanted to scream or disappear. The house was silent. But inside me, everything was too loud. I stayed there for nearly an hour, unmoving, until the stillness turned into nausea. I got up and walked back downstairs. The living room was dark, save for the glow of the lamp left on by the stairs. He wasn't in the guest room. Not on the porch. I finally found him in the garage. He was leaning against the workbench, staring at nothing. I didn't lie to you, he said. The air was cold in the garage. I didn't answer right away. You had someone, I said eventually. You have someone. He nodded, slowly. Not the way you think. That line doesn't work on people like me. He looked at me now. You think this was calculated? I didn't know what to say. My mouth wouldn't settle into a shape that made sense. She and I ended things months ago. But there were still remnants. Logistics. She was supposed to drop off the last of my stuff 2 weeks ago. I crossed my arms. But she still thinks there's something there. He didn't answer. That told me more than any explanation would. She smiled at you, I said. Like she still belongs to you. His voice was quieter now. Maybe she thinks she does. I stepped back. Then why are you here? He didn't answer. The question hung in the cold air between us. I left him standing in the garage. Upstairs again, I lay down next to my husband. This time, I curled toward his back. I didn't touch him, but I listened to the sound of his breath, steady and unaware. My eyes stayed wide open in the dark. By morning, the air in the house had shifted again. My husband was up early, coffee already brewing, eggs in a skillet. He moved like someone who'd made peace with a reality I hadn't caught up to yet. He offered me a plate. I took it. I ate. No one said anything about the previous day. No one mentioned the woods. No one mentioned the kiss. No one mentioned the woman. Instead, my husband asked if we could host dinner next weekend. Just family. Something normal. I nodded. Later, while I was in the backyard pretending to water the dying plants, his son came out and stood on the porch. We didn't speak. Not right away. Eventually, he stepped down onto the grass. "You don't believe me," he said. "I don't know what I believe anymore." We stood in the silence together, eyes on the same tree, pretending like the world hadn't cracked between us. Then he said, "You'll hate me for what comes next." I turned to face him. "What?" But he didn't answer. Instead, he walked back inside. That evening, I opened the guest room door to put away fresh towels. There was a note on the bed. It wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't signed. But I recognized the handwriting. It was folded neatly. I unfolded it, hands trembling before I even read the first word. It wasn't a confession. It was a goodbye. It didn't explain anything. Just 6 words, scrawled in the middle of the page. "Don't wait." I never really stayed. I stared at the words for so long I forgot to breathe. Then I heard the front door open. And my husband's voice called up the stairs. "He left?" My throat closed. Then another voice followed his, one I hadn't heard in years. "His father." "I tried to stop him," he said. But he wouldn't tell me why. And that's when I realized. He never meant to stay. Not with me. Not with her. Not with anyone. The hallway was quiet, almost unnaturally so. I stood still with the letter in my hand, the words etched across the paper beginning to blur, not from tears but from the sheer numbness pressing into my skull. Don't wait. I never really stayed. It wasn't just the message, it was the finality of it. No explanation. No closure. Just absence. Footsteps moved downstairs. Slow. Careful. I folded the note and slid it into the back pocket of my jeans before I turned. When I came down, they were both in the kitchen, my husband and his father, standing near the table with half-full mugs, the kind of silence between them that wasn't waiting to be filled. I hovered in the doorway, invisible for a second, maybe longer. "He didn't say anything to you?" my husband asked his father. "Only that he needed to leave," the older man answered. "Didn't offer more than that." They both looked at me when I finally stepped into the room. I nodded as if I'd heard only the tail end, but I'd caught every word. My husband studied me for a beat longer, then looked away. The rest of the day passed as if someone had torn the center out of it. I moved through it in fragments, folding laundry that didn't need folding, boiling water I never used, standing by the window too long pretending to be focused on birds that weren't even there. Evening came fast, though the clock disagreed. My husband suggested dinner out, something casual but not takeout. He mentioned that place on Ridge Hill Avenue, the one with the good cornbread and the servers who always remembered his name. I agreed before I had a chance to think. We didn't talk much at the table. He filled the space with stories, work talk, questions I didn't hear until they'd passed. I nodded at the right times, smiled when I remembered how. I even laughed, once. It felt strange in my mouth. Back at the house, he poured 2 glasses of wine and sat with me on the porch. The air was cool, not quite cold. The sky stretched above us, stars buried behind a thin layer of cloud. We sat in silence long enough for me to forget we weren't alone. Then he asked the one thing I hadn't prepared for. "Did something happen between you two?" The words didn't pierce, they dropped, heavy and dull. I looked at him. Not shocked. Not afraid. Just tired. "What do you mean?" He took a sip, then set the glass down. "I mean exactly what I asked." I stared ahead. The silence dragged too long. "I saw the way you looked at each other," he said finally. "I should have said something days ago. I could have lied. I could have deflected. But I said, yes. One word. Clear. Still. He didn't react immediately. Just breathed in, slow and sharp, and then looked down at his hands like he was counting the lines on his palms. "Did it mean anything?" he asked. I didn't answer. He laughed once, low. "That's an answer too." Neither of us moved. Later that night, he went upstairs before me. Didn't ask me to follow. Didn't wait. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the drawer where the scissors were kept, as if it might open and pull me inside. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink for a long time. When I finally did go upstairs, the bedroom light was off. He was facing the wall, his breathing deep but uneven. Not asleep. I lay down without speaking. My body stayed stiff on top of the covers. We didn't touch. Not that night. Not the next. By the third day, we were speaking again, politely, carefully, like neighbors. He made coffee, handed me a mug without looking directly at me. I asked if he needed anything at the store. He said no, thank you. We moved through the days like actors in a scene neither of us had rehearsed for. Then came Sunday. He told me over breakfast that his father wanted to have us over for dinner. "Just the three of us," he said. "Keep things simple." I nodded. That evening, we arrived at the house just before dusk. The lights were already on, casting a warm glow across the porch. I could smell garlic and something roasted before we even stepped inside. His father greeted us with the same dry calm he always had, a handshake for his son, a half smile for me. Nothing in his expression revealed the events of the woods. He offered wine. I took it. We sat at the table while he finished setting dishes down. Dinner was quiet, formal, almost sterile. We talked about traffic, the weather, a new grocery store being built near the post office. My husband carried most of the conversation, performing normalcy with such ease I almost envied it. Midway through the meal, his father stood to grab something from the kitchen. When he returned, he had a small black box in his hand, not a gift, not wrapped, just plain. He placed it in the center of the table. Neither of us reached for it. He cleared his throat and said, "This was left on the bench out back. I think you should see it." My husband reached first. He opened the lid slowly. Inside, nestled into black velvet, were the green gloves I'd thought I'd lost. The ones from the lodge. My breath left me before I could stop it. My husband looked at me. Long, hard. He said nothing. Then he closed the box and pushed it gently back toward his father. "I think dinner's over," he said. We left without saying another word. Back at the house, I sat on the bottom stair while he walked the kitchen in slow circles. Neither of us had shoes on. The hardwood was cold. I opened my mouth twice before finding something to say. "I didn't put them there." He stopped walking. "I believe you," he said. "But it doesn't matter anymore." I stared at the floor. "Why not?" He turned toward me, face unreadable. "Because you're not the only one who kissed him." The room stopped. I looked up. "What?" He said it again. Slower. "I kissed him too." Then he walked past me, up the stairs, without waiting for me to follow.